For 75 years, the world community has been waiting, and the Palestinians and the Israelis have paid the price. This is Bishop Robert Stearns with this week's Israel Frontlines update, and I don't know how much more frontline we could be than right here on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. So if you have an interest, if you're trying to figure out and process all of the news, and wow, is there news this week? If you're trying to process what's happening in Israel, Jerusalem, Gaza, the greater Middle East, and what is its impact on your life and our world, then I want to invite you to this weekly update. I've been traveling to this region for 32 years. For the past 32 years, I've been having deep conversations with everyone who will talk, everyone who will communicate about the complexities of this land and this situation. And I invite you to come along on the journey. So I'm glad you're here. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. Let's get into what has happened this week. Obviously, the enormous news in recent days is President Trump's news conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu and their discussions about Gaza. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But before we get there, I've been here in the land now for about 4 days. So I'm here currently with 38 significant leaders from 4 different nations and about a dozen different states. And the first thing I want to mention before we get to the news conference between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is just the atmosphere in the land. I was here in October. A lot of you were following along when I was here in October. And the difference between October and here, the end of January, beginning of February, there is such a marked improvement in a sense of optimism and hope. This country has not experienced this level of despair and terror probably since, honestly, the Yom Kippur War. October 7th was just a tragedy that rocked this nation. And this is our 5th solidarity trip since October 7th. But the attitude here, there is a definite sense of optimism and hope that I have not experienced here since October the 7th. So that is encouraging. There's a sense of renewed vitality in the spirit of the people. And a lot of that is because week by week, various of the hostages are being released. This week, after an unbelievable 484 days in captivity, 3 hostages, Israeli hostages, were released. That was Yarden Bibas, Ofer Calderon, and American-Israeli Keith Siegel. They were released along with 5 Thai hostages. These were foreign workers who just were in the wrong place at the wrong time and were captured arbitrarily on October 7th. And so those 8 hostages were released this week. That marks, I believe, the third or the 4th beginning release of the hostages. And there's just a collective sigh of relief every time that happens. That is causing, I think, a lot of hope across the nation. In the meantime, there is this incredible news conference with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, where President Trump makes these statements. Really, we need to look for a place for the refugees in Gaza to be resettled. He's spoken publicly in the past about Jordan, about Egypt, and now there are other nations that are starting to be mentioned as possible relocation sites. And he has said these phrases that we need to go in, we need to rebuild Gaza, we're going to own Gaza. It's unclear when he says that. Is he talking literally about the United States owning Gaza? Is this a metaphoric we? What exactly is he saying? And my inbox has been flooded with questions from you asking for my comments on this. And I wanted to give it a couple days so that some of the dust could settle. President Trump is known for speaking kind of statements that then become clarified a few days later, so I've been waiting to understand more fully. So what are my thoughts on this? My thoughts are President Trump is stating the obvious. This problem, this Palestinian-Israeli conflict, has been going on for 75 years. 75 years. For 75 years, billions upon billions of dollars have been thrown at this problem. There has been summit after summit, peace plan after peace plan. I was of the age when I started coming into this situation in the early 90s. Oslo was the magic pill that was going to save everything here, the Oslo Accords. Yitzhak Rabin ended up paying for this with his life. He was making strong overtures towards peace. Then after 10 years of the Oslo Accords, everyone finally realized this is not going anywhere. And then we had Yasser Arafat, we had Camp David, where Ehud Barak offered Yasser Arafat, literally, these are not figurative terms, literally he offered Arafat 97% of the land that they were requesting. Folks, what kind of deal, when you're negotiating and 97% is offered to you, are you negotiating in good faith, or is there something else going on here? So I think whatever you think of President Trump, whatever you think of, is this a realistic plan? What is this? Is he serious about this? Here's what he's saying. What the world has done for 75 years is extend the suffering of the Palestinian people, which has allowed them to be further radicalized by Iran, by Qatar, by their proxies, by their enablers, which has resulted in ongoing violence against Israel, death in Israel. You have death for the Palestinians, death for Israelis, and on the ground, we are farther away from a possible peace than ever before. So I think what President Trump is saying is that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. The world has failed for 75 years to produce any kind of sane resolution to this conflict. And President Trump is saying, hey, it's time to draw a line in the sand. This isn't working. We've got to go back to the drawing board. And I challenge you in human history, go back to your history books and find a people who have been called refugees for 75 years. This does not happen in human history. There's a war, there's a conflict. After virtually every war, there are refugees, and within a matter of years, maybe a decade, they settle into some new arrangement and they rebuild their lives. And so I think President Trump is very wisely looking at the fact that if we just continue on with what we've been doing, we're going to get the same result, which is a radicalized Palestinian population that then is colluded with and enabled by this increasing far left oppressed versus oppressor mentality in cahoots with radical Islam. And that's a script that you just can't even make up. You can't believe it. So where is this being enabled? Well, the Department of Education has just announced the first civil rights investigations into 5 universities, and it's about time. Columbia University, Northwestern University, Portland State University, the University of California at Berkeley, and the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. There are official Department of Education investigations against these universities because, again, you see time after time, you see, can you imagine any other group? Imagine any other racial group, any other sociological group being barred? Could you imagine for 2 minutes any other group physically being barred from going to the library, from going to their class? And yet on university campuses across America and around the world, Jewish students are not safe and are not even able to physically access the classrooms where they are studying. And so the Department of Education is launching this investigation and saying that it's time for a crackdown against these anti-Semitic actions that are happening all across the nation. There is a massive change that is happening. I don't know what it's going to lead to. It could lead to an uprising in the Arab world. But I want to say this as I close. This very much reminds me of December, right after the November elections of President Trump's first election. And the New York Times reached out to me and asked for my position on the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem. They reached out to me and to another author to give opposing sides to this. And the whole world was saying, if America moves the embassy to Jerusalem, it's going to be World War III. It is going to cause a massive global meltdown and nuclear war, and it'll be destruction beyond belief. And I argued in my article in the New York Times opinion section that it would be a step towards reality. Because in any peace plan that has ever been offered, there have been peace plans where Jerusalem is divided, but there's never been a peace plan in which Jerusalem is not served as the capital of Israel. So Jerusalem is, both historically and in modern day reality, the capital of Israel. I was excoriated. I was vilified. The comment, you're a warmonger, you're a religious fanatic calling for the end of the world. I said, no, I'm a pragmatist. I'm a realist. It's the capital of Israel. Move the embassy there because you're beginning to draw a line in the sand. This reminds me of that time. What President Trump is saying is this: what the world family has been doing for 75 years is not working. For 75 years, we've been waiting from the Palestinian community for the arising of an Anwar Sadat, of a Martin Luther King Jr., of a Nelson Mandela. We've been waiting for the rising up of someone who will say to the Palestinian community, the way of violence, the way of imagining and teaching our children that there is going to be a time that from the river to the sea, the Jews are driven out. This is not the path forward. For 75 years, the world community has been waiting, and the Palestinians and the Israelis have paid the price. It's time to think differently. And that's what President Trump is doing. And that's the report this week from Israel Frontlines Update. I'll see you next week.